Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of my conversation with María Tomás-Keegan, who shared her story of personal loss of her aunts, her mother, and her 2 brothers. I'm Susan F. Moody. I'm your guest host today of Tips for the Transition. I'm standing in for María because we just couldn't figure out how she could interview herself, and she has an important story to share with us. María is one of the co-authors of the new book titled From Resilience to Brilliance, and it's going to be available on Amazon. The inspiring stories in this book help us to know that we're not alone when life tosses us curveballs, and share some transitional tips and strategies from other successful entrepreneurs just like María. So María, thank you for sharing your story. When we last left off, we were kind of really getting into the emotional and personal journey of grief with your brothers and your mothers and your aunt. And others who have been watching are probably struggling with some of those same that same journey as you. And if you could share some of the ways you found to make that journey a little bit easier. I know it's never easy, that much is for sure, and you're still going through the journey. But some of the things that you're going through, I think it's important for the viewers to kind of hear that they're not alone, and it's okay to feel the grief and experience the loss.
Yeah, Susan, you're so right about that. I don't know that the journey through grief ever ends once it starts, which is, I guess that is that's not a terribly encouraging way to put it, I suppose, but I find it actually helps me a lot of other parts of my life. It helps me to understand that life goes on. We hear that all the time. And that my situation could be a lot worse. And what I like to try to do each time I lose someone significant in my life is to find the gift that they left me.
Very nice.
So everyone has to do that in a different way, and it depends on who you've lost and the kind of relationship you've had with them. But if you feel significant grief after a loss, then you've probably had a significant relationship. And you're going to go through all kinds of things. It might be anger. It might be, and it could be anger at God, or it might be guilt that you maybe didn't do enough. I know that I felt that a couple of times with, that I didn't do enough to help my other aunt when I lived with her and was her caregiver, and she was dying, and I really wanted to save her, and I couldn't, and I felt guilty about that for a while. It could be, it could just be that hole in your heart I spoke about earlier that you just don't know how to fill. But I believe that when I have surrounded myself with memories that help me to heal that hole and think about the good things that the people who I've lost have left for me, so that I can just be a better me because of their gift. Sorry.
I love that you're talking about the gift that they have left behind, because I think even when we have relationships that aren't smooth and steady and as loving as the ones like you had with your aunt, your mother, and your brothers, there's still a relationship there. And to recognize, sometimes we learn from that tumultuous relationship, right? and that there is still a gift in that relationship. So I love that perspective of looking at whoever's touched your lives, good, bad, or indifferently, they've left you a gift of some sort. Yeah, love that.
Yeah, I think that's with almost any kind of loss. I've been talking about the loss of people, but I have a really soft spot in my heart for rescuing animals, and I've lost a number of them over the years, and that's a different kind of loss, but it's a loss nevertheless. And I tend to fill those losses with more animals.
Okay.
Because I need to love them. I want to love them. It's just a part of me, and there are so many out there who need love. So, so that's just another kind of loss that, and we go through emotions with all of that. So I don't know what else to share except that we all have to find our own way of dealing with the grief. And as you say, whether it was a relationship that was smooth sailing or a bit rocky, there's still that sense of loss, and the emotions can be very different depending on the kind of relationship. But we have to find our way, and I believe talking with others about how they've done it helps give us just some ideas of what might work for us, especially if we're stuck in a rut and can't find our way out, because that is no place to stay when you are feeling deep grief and loss. Staying stuck in that rut can eventually become your grave. And I don't mean that literally, I mean that figuratively. But it's really a hard place to dig out from. And when you feel the ebb and the flow of the emotions, when you allow that to happen, then there's an opportunity to release and relieve it over time. But when you stay stuck in it, that opportunity doesn't present itself.
Well, you've given us a couple of great ideas of how to go through that ebb and flow. I think it's important too, sometimes we don't talk about the grief that we're experiencing. We think it's a taboo subject, and for just hearing you kind of give us permission to speak about it, because I think others want to help you through the grief, they just don't know how to approach it, right? And what to say to others. So I think just being open to letting, like you said, share your grief with others, and just for a listening ear. I love how you said how to fill the hole in your heart with youth. Sometimes it's with getting new animals or surrounding yourself with different personal items. So I think you shared some really great ideas during this segment with us. So thank you for that. As those of you who are followers of Maria's interviews know, we are saving the best for last. In our wrap-up segment, you're going to hear Maria share several of the lessons she learned and some more helpful tips on how to manage and get through loss and grief that accompanies when you lose somebody or something that you really love. Stay tuned for Tomorrow with Maria. I'm Susan F. Moody, and I'll see you next time on Tips for the Transition. Thank you, Maria.